The city tried to move on. News cycles shifted, posters came down, and the warehouse by the river returned to silence. On the surface, it looked like the nightmare had ended. But Detective Jonah Reeves knew better. Networks like this did not collapse overnight. They adapted. They hid. They punished anyone who threatened their profits. Eli Parker went home, but he did not return to the boy he had been. He startled at loud noises. He slept with the light on. When his mother left the room, even for a moment, panic flooded his face. The doctors called it trauma, a word that sounded too small for what had been done to him. At school, teachers whispered. Other children stared. Some parents asked questions they did not mean to ask out loud. Mrs. Parker noticed the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. She began locking every door twice. Reeves visited once a week, not as a detective, but as a quiet presence. He brought comic books. He brought a battered baseball glove. He never asked questions about the ring. He let Eli talk about anything else. But Eli remembered more than anyone realized. It started with a drawing. One afternoon, while Reeves sat at the kitchen table pretending to read, Eli pushed a sheet of paper toward him. The drawing showed a ring, larger than the warehouse one. Above it hung a symbol, a rough shape that looked like a broken crown. Reeves felt his stomach drop. "Where did you see this?" he asked gently. Eli shrugged. "It was everywhere," he said. "On jackets, on walls, on the man's phone." "What man?" "The one who never yelled." Reeves took the drawing to the precinct. The broken crown was not new to him. It appeared in cold cases across 3 states, always near illegal fight rings, trafficking routes, and missing children reports that went nowhere. The symbol belonged to something bigger than a single operation. It belonged to an organization known only as Crownfall. That night, Reeves received a call from an unknown number. A calm voice spoke. "Mail. Controlled. You should stop digging," the voice said. "You already won." Reeves said nothing. "There are consequences for curiosity," the voice continued, "especially when children start remembering things they shouldn't." The line went dead. 2 days later, Rosa Alvarez's apartment burned down. She survived. Barely. The fire was ruled accidental. Faulty wiring. Old building. No charges. Reeves knew it was a message. The next message came closer. Mrs. Parker found her front door unlocked one morning. Nothing was taken. Nothing was broken. But on the kitchen counter sat a single black glove, its palm marked with the broken crown. She screamed until her throat went raw. Protective custody followed. New address. New routine. Eli cried when he was told they were moving again. Reeves watched the boy's shoulders sag as if he had aged years in a single breath. This was the price of survival. Reeves broke protocol. He began working off the books, calling in favors, digging into sealed files, and following leads the department considered long dead. Crownfall had influence. They had money. They had friends in places that wore suits instead of scars. One name kept appearing at the edges of everything. Marcus Hale, philanthropist, investor, the public face of youth boxing programs all across the Midwest. He was a man who smiled easily in photographs, his arm always around a child wearing clean gloves and fresh gear. Reeves knew he had to see this man for himself. Using a false name, Reeves attended one of Hale's charity events. The venue was elegant. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling, soft music filled the air, and well-dressed donors sipped wine while praising Hale's commitment to at-risk youth. It was a picture of perfect philanthropy. Reeves watched Hale move through the crowd like a king among his subjects, his polished smile never faltering for a moment. And then, for just a second, Hale looked directly at Reeves from across the room. The smile was there, but it did not reach his eyes. It was a cold, calculating look and acknowledgement. In that instant, Reeves knew he had been made. Later that night, the confirmation came. Reeves found his car window smashed. Lying on the driver's seat was a note, a single piece of paper with 3 chilling words. "Season 1 ends here." It was a message, a threat, a promise. That night, sleep was impossible. The words echoed in his mind, a declaration of war from an enemy he couldn't see. The next morning, he went to see Eli. The boy was the reason for all of this, the one he had managed to save. In careful, measured words, Reeves explained that some bad people were angry and that it might be safer if he stayed away for a while. Eli listened quietly, his small frame wrapped in a blanket. He just nodded, but his hands clenched the fabric so tightly his knuckles turned white. "You're scared?" Eli said, his voice barely a whisper. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Reeves didn't lie. He couldn't lie to this boy. Yes, he admitted. Eli thought for a moment, his young eyes holding a wisdom far beyond his years. Then he leaned in and whispered, "The man who never yelled is scared too." Reeves leaned closer, his heart pounding. "How do you know that, Eli? What do you mean?" The boy's voice was faint. "He used to watch the fights on a screen," Eli explained. "But when the big man came, he stood up straight." "The big man?" Reeves asked. "Who was the big man?" Eli's next words sent a shiver down his spine. "The one with the crown." Reeves understood then. Marcus Hale wasn't the top. He was just the face, the respectable frontman for a monstrous operation. Crownfall had a true leader, a king who stayed hidden in the shadows, pulling the strings. Hale was a pawn, a well-dressed distraction. The real power, the big man with the crown, was still out there, untouched. The game had just become infinitely more dangerous. The next move came without warning. A boy disappeared in Ohio. Same age, same build, same M.O. And near the bus stop where he was last seen, the chilling signature was left behind, a broken crown spray painted on the pavement. The war wasn't over. It had just entered its next brutal phase. They were taunting him, expanding their territory, showing him his victory was temporary. Back in his apartment, the evidence board was no longer just a board. It now covered an entire wall. Photos, maps, articles, and notes were all connected by a web of red strings. A spider's web connecting cities and victims. He stared at it, the scale of the horror finally sinking in. Crownfall didn't just traffic children. They broke them, sold their pain, and discarded what remained like trash. And now, they were daring him to stop them again, mocking his every effort. He knew he couldn't do this alone anymore. The department wouldn't help. The system was compromised. He was on his own, but he wasn't out of options. Reaching for his phone, he dialed a number he had sworn he would never use again. A contact from a past life, someone who operated in the same gray areas he was now forced to inhabit. The line picked up. Without preamble, he said, "I need you." Off the record, there was a long pause on the other end, a moment of heavy silence. Then, a familiar voice, laced with a hint of tired resignation, replied, "I was wondering when you'd call." Outside, the city hummed with life, completely unaware of the old and violent storm that was stirring just beneath its surface. By the time dawn broke over the city, the underground fight ring was no longer a secret. Police cruisers lined the industrial district. News vans crowded the streets. Red and blue lights bounced off warehouse walls that had hidden violence for years. But for Daniel Mercer, none of it mattered yet. He stood inside the empty arena where the final raid had taken place, staring at the blood-stained concrete floor. The smell of sweat and rusted metal still clung to the air. The crowd was gone. The fighters were gone. The money was gone. What remained were echoes of screaming and the sound of fists hitting flesh. Somewhere in this place, his son had been held. Daniel crouched and picked up a small object near the cage. A broken plastic wristband, faded blue. His throat tightened. He remembered buying a pack just like it for Ethan's birthday party 2 years ago. Superheroes printed along the edge. Cheap, bright, easy to replace. Except this one was not replaceable. "Mr. Mercer." Daniel turned. Detective Laura Kim stood a few feet away, her jacket unbuttoned, eyes tired but sharp. She had not slept either. "We found more kids," she said. "Alive. Some injured. All scared. They're being moved to the hospital now." Daniel nodded slowly. "Ethan," Laura hesitated. "Just long enough to hurt. We're still confirming identities." Daniel closed his eyes. He had prepared himself for this moment, or at least he thought he had. Prepared for bad news. Prepared for silence. Prepared for the worst. Nothing prepared him for waiting. Across the city, in a quiet hospital room, a boy stared at the ceiling tiles and counted cracks he could barely see. His hands trembled beneath the blanket. A nurse had told him he was safe now, that it was over. Ethan Mercer did not believe her. Every loud sound made his body stiffen. Every footstep outside the door made his heart race. He had learned that safety was temporary. Promises meant nothing. The door opened slowly. Ethan turned his head, ready to flinch. Instead, he saw his father. Daniel froze in the doorway. For a second, he was afraid to move, afraid the image would vanish like everything else. Ethan looked thinner, older. His face carried something no child should carry. But it was him. "Dad," Ethan whispered. Daniel crossed the room in 3 steps and dropped to his knees beside the bed. He did not speak at first. He just reached out, carefully, as if asking permission. Ethan's fingers closed around his father's hand. That was all it took. Daniel broke. He pressed his forehead against the mattress, gripping Ethan's hand as tears soaked the blanket. All the fear, the rage, the guilt he had carried for months spilled out in one silent collapse. "I'm here," Daniel said finally, voice shaking. "I've got you. I'm not letting go again." Ethan nodded once. He did not cry. He had already cried enough. While reunions unfolded across the city, the other side of the story came into focus. The ring's leader, Marcus Hale, sat in an interrogation room downtown. His expensive suit was gone, his confidence with it. He stared at the table, jaw tight, eyes cold. Detective Kim slid a file toward him. Photos, names, bank records, fight footage. "You ran children through a cage like animals," she said. "For profit." Marcus laughed quietly. "You think I built that alone?" Laura leaned forward. "No, but you were the face." He looked up then, smiled. "There will always be another ring," he said. "Another crowd willing to pay." Laura did not smile back. "Maybe, but not yours." Charges stacked fast. Kidnapping, abuse, trafficking, murder. The list seemed endless. The city watched as one arrest became many. Investors, enforcers, fixers, even a few names that surprised the public. But justice, Daniel learned, was not clean. Weeks later, life did not snap back into place. Ethan woke screaming some nights. Loud noises still sent him diving for cover. He flinched when strangers got too close. Daniel took time off work, ignored calls, let everything else fall away. Healing was slow. One afternoon, Ethan sat on the front steps, watching the sun dip low. Daniel joined him, handing over a glass of lemonade. "They said the bad people are gone," Ethan said. Daniel sat beside him. "Some are. Some will be." Ethan nodded, thoughtful. "What about the other kids?" "They're getting help," Daniel said. "Just like you." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Dad," he asked, "why did they pick me?" Daniel's chest tightened. He chose his words carefully. "They didn't pick you because of who you are," he said. "They picked you because they're broken." Ethan accepted that answer, or at least enough to let it rest. Across town, Detective Kim watched the city from her office window. The case was closing, but it would never really end. Files were stacked neatly now, evidence logged, confessions recorded, but she knew something the headlines would never say. Stopping one ring did not erase the hunger that created it. She closed the file and turned off the light. Months passed. Spring arrived quietly. Ethan returned to school. Daniel returned to work. Life resumed its shape, though the edges were forever changed. They went to therapy together. They talked more. They listened better. One evening, Daniel found Ethan in the garage, holding a pair of old boxing gloves Daniel had once used in college. "You don't have to do that," Daniel said quickly. Ethan shook his head. "I don't want to fight," he said. "I just want to feel strong." Daniel considered that, then nodded. They signed up at a small gym. No crowds, no cages, just mats, patience, and rules built around respect. Ethan learned to breathe, to focus, to trust his body again. Strength came slowly. 1 year later, a small article appeared online. A former Underground Ring supporter had been arrested in another state. Authorities credited anonymous tips and tighter enforcement. Daniel read it, then closed the browser. Some battles would never fully end, but this one had been answered. That night, as Ethan slept peacefully for the first time in a long while, Daniel stood in the doorway and watched his son breathe. The city outside hummed with noise and motion, unaware of the quiet victory inside one small house. The ring had been exposed. The child had been found. The silence had finally been broken. And this time, it stayed broken.